Last year, I decided to write an exhibition myself to get an understanding of what my students were going through in order for them to write their exhibition. To start off, I needed to plan out my ideas. I had a lot of ideas, but I needed to plan it out somehow. So I started to brainstorm on a piece of paper like this. I just got a really big A3 piece of paper, and I started to put all my ideas down on the paper and started to make connections between them. So I started off by thinking of some objects that might work for my exhibition. So I thought that there was a very interesting claim by somebody called Ben Shapiro, who's a political commentator, and he wrote a tweet that was the object. The tweet was the object, and the tweet was simply, hip hop isn't music. Totally disagree with that, so it's a very controversial claim that I thought I could discuss for this exhibition. Next up, this idea of there's nothing new under the sun. Have you heard about this before? I think it's a quote, not sure who by. This, though, is not an object. It's important to understand that this is not an object. The tweet is an object, so I could use that. If I was going to use this concept, there's nothing new under the sun, or this quote, I'd need to find it somewhere. Do a little bit of research into this. This idea led me into this idea of everything is a remix. And this is a YouTube video. So this is an object that could work. Thinking along these lines of there's nothing new under the sun and hip hop music, whether hip hop is music or not, I had to think about some hip hop that I thought was really interesting that connected with this. It's an album called by De La Soul called 3 Feet High and Rising. This is an object. This actual album is an object. I could physically bring this album in and show you, or I could just get a photo of the album cover. What's interesting about this album is it's extremely popular. It's one of the most popular hip-hop albums of all time, but the artists, De La Soul, didn't make a cent. Actually, they lost money off this album because they got sued for all the samples that they didn't clear in this album. Something that relates to that is an album by the Avalanches called Since I Left You. And this album, again, is an object, the actual album. What's interesting about this album is I think there are no live instruments anywhere in this album. Everything is something that was already made, a sample, and they put all the samples together to turn them into a song, which also relates to De La Soul, 3 Feet High and Rising, which is very sample based, which relates to this idea of everything is a remix and there's nothing new under the sun. And this idea that hip hop isn't music is actually coming from that idea that the music isn't something that was created, it was sampled off somebody else, so then it's not actual music. And then I did a little bit of research into this, and I found out that Beethoven was not really accepted by his peers back in the day. They didn't accept his music, his style of music. I'd need to do a little bit more research into this because I'm not certain, but I thought this was interesting. One problem is this is not an object, but I could find an object to support this idea. It could be an article, it could be a quote by another musician or somebody at that time. The same with this, just because it's not an object right now, it is an idea that I could find an object that could be related to this. So I just started to brainstorm objects that I thought was interesting. The next part of my process is I started to go through all of the prompts and work out which prompts would work with these objects. So, going through, number 4, I don't know if you can see that, number 4, or right underneath it, on what grounds Might we doubt a claim? So, this prompt relates definitely to this. This claim, hip hop isn't music, I doubt this claim straight away, so I'm sure I could discuss how I would doubt this claim. Next up, there's nothing new under the sun. On what grounds might we doubt a claim? Yeah, that's a claim, so maybe that could be doubted, and how could we doubt that claim? Can you create completely novel knowledge, or is everything built on the shoulders of giants? The same with this is a claim, that everything is a remix. De La Soul would be a bit of a stretch to make this a claim, same with the avalanches, but this would also be a claim, so this could relate, this could work. Next up, as I went through the list of prompts, I found other prompts. There's one about experts. Number 22 is about experts. What's interesting about this tweet, one of the ways that Ben Shapiro provides evidence for this claim is he says that his dad is a music professor and his dad claims that hip hop isn't music, so it must be true. Very interesting that if you have an expert opinion, all of a sudden you start to make your claim a little bit more legitimate. But is it? So, especially when it's a ridiculous claim like this, does it make it more credible or not if an expert says it? So you can see what I'm doing here. I can't relate this expert's idea really to much else. Maybe this Beethoven idea, maybe there were experts at that time that were doubting him as a musician. So you can start to see that for prompt 1, I have 4 possible objects that I could use. For prompt 22, I have 2 objects. Maybe I'd need to think of other objects that could relate to this prompt and maybe this theme and so on. What I found though is my ideas were being pigeonholed. My ideas were all similar and about music, which is okay, but I wanted to make it more broad. I wanted to open up to other parts of the real world to show that I could discuss other parts of TOK in other areas. Okay, so this idea, I tried this, it didn't work for me. It's not to say it's not going to work for you. This could be a way that you approach planning out your exhibition, but this one didn't work for me.